So, I'll go first. Talking about Jack the Ripper, the character himself, the first thing that really jumped out at me when you were playing as him was the screen effects and the UI, and how sort of like a little twisted version of the the murder mysteries and the sort of Sherlocky like things you have that come all over the place in the investigations. Jack has these, horribly scrawled in bad handwriting, looks like it's scratched into a wall. Writing says, kill him, go get Jacob, do this, kill these people, no witnesses. That just kind of show how crazy and all over the place his thoughts are. And every once in a while, the screen goes absolutely nuts. So I thought this was a great way to handle the character, because between Jacob and Evie, they kind of feel mostly the same to play as. And we can talk about that more, other times. But the point is that with Jack, you absolutely know you're playing as someone who's pretty much insane, because even the sort of reality of the game, this screen which you view everything through, is sort of tearing apart, and it kind of jumps around sometimes and little yellow lines pop through, and the UI just gets kind of wacky. And I really like how they handle that, because I think it establishes, right off the bat, the insanity of Jack through a very easy to understand way. What did you guys think about that?
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting from kind of an in-universe perspective, especially to do with the story and the animus, because it kind of shows that the mental state of a person can affect how the animus shows a memory. There's been some speculation that, for instance, assassins are always mostly, like, especially, for instance, with Shay and his experiences with the assassins, the assassins in Rogue are almost comically evil compared to how they are in most games, and that could be seen as like Shay's mental state and his view of the assassins altering how his memories portray the assassins. And I think that with Jack, it's not straight up memory altering, but it's very clear that there is a visual difference between a sane person with Evie and an insane person with Jack.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree that those little, screen effects were very cool and very different from what I was expecting. The very fact that we were even given the chance to play as Jack at all was kind of crazy and cool in a really interesting way, and I really enjoyed it. I think my only complaint with any of that is I think they should have done just a little bit more with it, because it started to get very repetitive. Because if you were playing as Jack for any length of time, you would just start seeing the exact same messages and screen twisting effects just every 30 seconds, exactly the same. Either there should have been more variety, or they should have been a little more spaced out, less frequent. That probably would have made them more effective, in my opinion.
To me, playing as Jack was not having a fun time, and to me, the glitching that occurred when you're playing as Jack showed how hard it would be to maintain synchronization with him, because there was like a huge glitch like across the whole screen that made it hard to see, and then it would be like rip him, kill him. It just made me think like whoever was playing was having a hard time playing as him. And to me, it was kind of like I was playing as a murderous Ted Bundy. So I didn't really have fun playing as him, but I really liked the tone that it put across.
Yeah, one criticism that has been leveled at Jack's character is that his motivation is very murky, and his characterization is kind of not quite all there. I think that's a valid criticism on a surface level, but at the same time, I think it'll be hard to fill in that motivation and characterization in a way that would have been respectful to the actual history and what we actually know. Jack's this horrible serial killer. It's kind of hard to... it's not an entirely fictional setting, and it's hard to reveal things without seeming somewhat disrespectful to the actual events and the people involved, especially the women he killed. But on the other hand, that they provided any at all might have been a mistake, because it seems like, sure, keeping Jack a mysterious figure is probably the right way to go, but there's this weird halfway thing in their characterization of Jack where they bother to name who he is. He's this guy called Jack the Lad, but it's not really compelling when it's done there. So I don't know. It's this weird place between they're trying to make it an interesting reveal and trying to respect the mystery and not making necessarily, this isn't quite the right word, but making light, I guess, of a horrible killer.
I agree. I think his characterization was really off because in all the pre-marketing materials, they set up that there was this whole reveal, like, who is Jack? And then they kind of wrote him off like, oh, yeah, that's Jacob and Jack the Lad. Wonder whatever happened to him. Like, come on. It just seemed so much like they were setting up some big reveal, like they were going to demask him and then, oh, it's you. And then they didn't even bother to demask him at the end. And it wouldn't have even mattered at that point because his character was so nondescript that it's as if, it seems so not there. Like, Jack the Ripper was really the character. There wasn't anyone underneath it. And they were teasing so much of that, like, who's the guy underneath the mask? And then at that point, the mask is just him, which I guess there's some neat thematic elements to that. But I felt like I was misled with, the whole thing of who is Jack, and that never really happened that way.
Yeah, I definitely agree that his characterization was just super murky, and the reveal was really awkward. As soon as Evie's investigating Jacob's house, and she sees that picture of, Jacob and Jack the Lad, I'm going, okay, this is the misdirection. This is the red herring of the story, and at the end it's going to be something mind-blowing. And they start playing with, okay, Jacob's in captivity or he's gone missing, right? And Frederick Aberline at one point makes this comment like, oh, the only person I know who's that good at killing is your brother. And you start thinking, oh, they're going to set it up like it's probably Jack the Lad and then surprise somehow it's Jacob or something like that. But no, it really was just, it's the guy that they say it is at the very beginning, and that's all there is to it. And the biggest fault for me with Jack is how unclear and strange his motivation seems to be. There seems to be this revenge angle to it, like he blames Jacob for the death of his mother, which they don't explain enough for us to care about. We're never really told enough information about the circumstances behind that incident to understand it well enough to empathize with him. And then at the very end, when he's having his boss battle fight with Evie, he starts talking about how he's going to save London and he's going to clean it up. And all of this is just about saving London. And how? How is murdering random prostitutes saving London? We need to know how the actions of the character translate into their motivation for any of it to make any sense. And we just don't get that in this story.
I had to check the Assassin's Creed wiki after I had completed it because I thought there was something I had missed with Jack's motivation. And it said that Sterrick, or a Templar thug, is the one who killed Jack's mother. I was like, why does Jack hate Jacob for something he had no control over? After I figured that out, I was wondering, I think it would have been better if a rook had killed Jack's mother, because then Jacob would have been partly responsible for it, or if they had just gone the Dark Knight route and just given him no origin story. So, because I don't get where he's coming from and why he hated Jacob for something he had literally not much control over. It was Starrick.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I always have a problem with stories where the bad guy blames the good guy for just not preventing some terrible thing from happening. It's like a building collapses and your wife dies and you're just really mad at Superman because he didn't save her. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of logical sense. And if the wiki was right and it was just some Starrick thug that killed Jack's mother, then that's exactly what's happening. For me, another thing that kind of frustrated me about Jack was just how, I guess, ridiculous and cartoony and I guess kind of outdated his portrayal of mental health problems is, because he literally is a cartoon psychopath. There's just like, he just wants to kill people because, whoa, he's crazy. He likes to kill people. That's pretty, he was in Lambeth Asylum for a time, and I'm making the assumption from the sparse revelations we had through Evie's dialogue that I guess Jacob put him in the mental asylum at some point, or someone put him in a mental asylum because he was a crazy little boy who wanted to kill people. And that's just really weak. It's just very, easy. It's lazy. It's like, we need to have a guy who kills people, and we kind of want to give him a reason for why he's doing it. But all of their sort of half-assed attempts at giving him a motivation just fall apart even further when they're just making him a cartoon psychopath.
I would agree that it's an old way to portray a killer, but I don't know that I would necessarily call it outdated, because I actually looked into, I wouldn't necessarily call it portrayal of, I think there's multiple facets here where it's not just portrayal of mental health problems, and at the same time it's not a mental health problem that they assign to him that is a definable one that we can pinpoint. It's hard, it's really, honestly, it's pretty hard to portray this horrendous killer with anything but in any other way than with violent insanity. I do think that making some justification in the game may have been the wrong tack. It's really inconsistent, strangely. For instance, actually, you can target civilians as Jack, like they are highlighted, but if you kill them, then you get a message that says Jack did not compromise his plans by killing innocent civilians. So he's in this weird spot where he's a mad killer, but he has this weird set of standards, and I think that kind of fits into this weird, there's this weird category in the, it's not, it's just this violent subcategory in the Psychopathy Wikipedia article. And everything that links violence and mental health points out that the two are not necessarily intertwined. And it's really hard to tell or link necessarily deviant behavior to mental illness. But one of the things it talks about is that psychopaths, it's been suggested, they use the word suggested, it's suggested that psychopaths tend to be more pre-planned violence than random violence. So that would go along with that, at least. But at the same time as he's in this area of mental health that's not really defined now, it was definitely not really defined then, in the 1800s. The time, if you remember, Lambeth Asylum would have been run, or at least set up, by Dr. Elliotson, who's a phrenologist and doesn't, he's a phrenologist, that's a quack science. He doesn't know anything about treating people. I'm sorry. This is just it confuses me to talk about it, and I'm trying to make sense of it as I go through this, but it's quite difficult. My notes are all over the place.
Yeah, I think the thing with his characterization and how he decides to murder people is very, very vague, and kind of all over the place.
I do want to say one more thing, which is that going off of what seems to be like the very vague glimpses we get into some kind of plan that he has set up, is he's manipulating women in the city, especially. We know that he's kind of got his thumb on Lady Owers, and he's using fear to control them. And that's further why he murders Jacob's recruits that are posing as prostitutes, is because they threaten to disrupt his control. So I think that there's more than just mental illness. I mean, I guess I'm inferring a lot, but more than just mental illness, I would suspect that he's got a lot of the worst prejudices that we would associate with the era. Like, he definitely thinks of himself as above other people, and especially in this case, above women. And I think that's where, I don't know, that's where I think that there are nuances to how he's portrayed, though I will agree that they're not, it's this weird, it's this bit between where they should have probably shown more explicitly, if they were going to show reasoning for the way he is, they should have shown it more explicitly. And this part where I'm trying to infer so much based off of what vague information we have.
There's a lot of vagueness going on. But one thing, Connor, to your point about how he premeditates a lot of stuff, one thing I liked about how we play as Jack is that there's the opening part, which I'll talk about later, but then there's the time when he does the cleanup at the ships in the island, and then when he goes to set up his plan in the asylum. And what I liked was the way he went about doing that, and that he is very, very calculating, and he thinks things through beforehand, and he has a plan. He's not sort of, like the Joker who just kind of chases after cars like a dog, he says, but he has something going on, and he's very methodical about how he does things. So after Evie does the second assassination mission, he goes in, and the little text on the side says, no witnesses. So you just kind of go in and kill all of your guys and all of the cops too if you play like that. But it fit with his character, I thought, what little of his character we have. Then the second time we do that, when we go in ahead of time and attack the people in the asylum, is what really made me feel off playing as Jack. Because playing as Jack, killing random thugs, fine. But when he has a name for his nurse, and he says, I'm going to kill whatever her name was, and there's actually sort of a person behind it, it felt really, really weird playing that part. And it got me, I guess, in the right mindset to play as Evie going in, because I felt just off. And we talked about this before when Conor and I were on Animus Island about the soundtrack and how the music really just feels wrong. That mission going through the asylum made me feel like, no, I shouldn't be doing this. This is weird. This is wrong. This is bad. And then switching to Evie and then going through afterwards put me in the perfect mindset to play as Evie. And like, I can fix this now. I can go and stop it.
Yeah.
So that was one set of two missions that worked really well together with Jack and Evie.
I would like to say one thing to your point before we get too much farther away from it. And I think that you're right. I think it's very interesting that Jack, when you play as Jack, there are a lot of, they go to great lengths to make it feel off and wrong. And I think this is just something that I just thought of off the top of my head, but I think that if they do succeed well in portraying Jack, it's that the way they portray him tends to be a perversion of the assassins. I mean, you start off immediately, and he's in control of the Rooks, not just any gang. He's in control of the Rooks. He's he's taken over control of the rooks from the main game that you built up as Jacob and Evie. So right off the bat, there's that, and he's manipulating the prostitutes, and obviously he goes very much further in every method of assassination he does. I mean, he's the first. You immediately play as him, and you're murdering people in the most horrible ways compared to the assassins, who are a lot more
Clean.
Clean, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Blade to the neck.
And that's my point. I think that probably what they were going for, and what probably got overshadowed by other things, is that Jack is mostly a perversion of the assassin.
I think that's just one example of many things that they probably really wanted to do, but couldn't for several reasons. And I'm going to get into that in a later segment here. But yeah, I agree completely.
I think that mental health can be portrayed better, and Jack's backstory could have been portrayed better. I just can't quite put my finger on how it could have been implemented in a better way.
Well, I think you can create a reason why he is the way he is. And I think they were touching on that. I think if they had presented the story of this little kid who loses everything that is important to him and then blames the people who he feels responsible and then tries to create his own, I guess, perversion of the creed as a response like that, it could have worked. It could have been pulled off. It could have been compelling. The problem, in my opinion, was not in the idea of it, but in the execution. Because honestly, I know I said earlier that I think it was an outdated and kind of unrealistic cartoony portrayal, but what Conor said about how you can't really portray Jack the Ripper any other way, I agree. I think that's true. I mean, in real life, Jack the Ripper was a horribly bloody, violent killer who, one of the most repugnant killers in terms of what he did to his victims. Just the worst. So I guess maybe they were smart to not try and make him empathetic at all, to just have him be as cartoony and villainous as possible, because in the real world, he was pretty cartoony and villainous.
I guess a better way to examine mental health would be with a character that isn't Jack the Ripper then.
Yeah, definitely.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that in terms of how we look at mental health, this definitely doesn't exactly help because I think it reinforces some of the wrong stereotypes about mental health. That's another longer discussion, but I think and we've talked about this exactly, but it's so many things scream, no, that's not what mental health is actually like. No, stop, please. So things went wrong with his characterization.
Yeah, that's not our current understanding of mental health, and certainly right now we're doing a lot in the modern day to be a lot more understanding and sympathetic to those with mental health issues. There is still as I mentioned, there's a whole category of mental health, and I think a lot of mental health and psychology is like this, but there's an awful lot that we still don't know. And I do think at the moment there is space for Jack to fit into that, but at the same time, I think that it can be hard to realize that, I guess. It's not necessarily obvious that, hey, Jack's in this category of mental health that we don't really know anything about, and we're taking advantage of that to portray this crazy person. Whereas I think a lot of people might just associate all mental health together when in truth there's a lot of different things that are going on for a lot of different people, and we don't really know that much about it.
One thing I kind of picked up on in the beginning, playing Jack the Ripper, I don't know if you guys saw some parallels to current events, but
oh, yes.
when they were talking about Jack the Ripper, who's an extremist assassin who radicalizes his followers and rule over London through fear. I was kind of like, I wonder if that was intentional. And then the papers sensationalizing the killings and inspiring copycat crimes kind of made me think, like, I wonder if they're trying to say something. Is this intentional? What did you guys think?
For sure. I think Ubisoft has a good track record of touching on issues that are important to a lot of people in our modern day. Watchdog security with Prism and digital surveillance. Assassin's Creed Unity with, sort of revolutionary themes and income inequality being big at that point in time. And this with, the slew of killings that happen daily and how the paper wanted to publish it. Because, we should have Jack's letters out. People should know when Jacob says, no, you're not helping. I really liked the way they handled that at the beginning.
And I think, well, I'll get to this later. It's literally like the last thing we talk about with Jack the Ripper. So I have a point, but I'll talk about it later.
Yeah, I was prepared to be like, what? Nah, it's not touching on any current events. I don't see that at all. But now that I think about it, you're pretty much right on the money with that, Katie. And it surprised me because Syndicate didn't touch on really modern current events much at all. It was very much just being what it was and being a fun little Assassin's Creed story. And Jeffrey Yohalem makes a lot of points about how, in some ways, the London we see in Syndicate is intended to be a more idealized version of it. That's why we see so many female gang members, which left a lot of people going, what's up with that? Because there weren't a whole lot of female gang members at the time in Victorian London. But Jack the Ripper, as a whole, is so different from Syndicate in so many ways that really shouldn't surprise me. Everything about it, from the tone to the style, is so much darker and more serious and grounded than Syndicate ever dreamed of being. So having it touch on common current events is, I guess, pretty fitting. So that about wraps it up for our thoughts on the character of Jack the Ripper. We are now going to move into our